Under the gold chandeliers of the Willard Foundation Gala, a woman screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the orchestra before anyone noticed. Only Maya Robinson saw it happen. She saw the flicker of fear in the server's eyes as a crystal flute shattered beside her feet. She saw the sharp, dismissive turn of Valerie Willard's head, the kind of gesture wealthy people make when they believe the world exists to clean up after them. And then Maya watched something worse. The young server forced a smile, apologizing for a mistake she never made. It was the smile that set something burning low in Maya's chest, a slow, controlled flame. Maya stepped forward to help, but a hand touched her elbow. A gentle pressure, practiced, polished. "You don't want to get involved," whispered a banker, whose name she never bothered to remember. This family has long memories, and longer grudges. Maya looked at him, at the sweat collecting near his collar, at the way he couldn't hold her gaze for more than a breath. She said nothing, but she stored his fear the way she stored everything, quietly, without ceremony, like another entry in a ledger she never let anyone else see. The music swelled, strings rising as if nothing had happened. Wealthy guests drifted through the ballroom, wrapped in velvet and champagne. Their laughter rang against the high ceilings of the Chicago Cultural Hall, echoing off the carved marble, like tiny hammers tapping out a warning. Maya inhaled slowly. The air tasted of lilies' perfume and polished floors. It was a world built on quiet power, and she walked through it like someone who had learned to study every shadow. Across the room, Richard Willard raised his glass, in greeting his smile too wide, too practiced. Beside him, his son Ethan lingered in the half-light shoulders, tense eyes darting toward Maya in a way she couldn't read, something between resentment and recognition. He was 15 tall for his age, with that willowy, uncertain posture of a boy who hadn't yet grown into the authority he was told he possessed. Valerie stood next to him, heavily jeweled and heavily guarded by her own delusions. Her gaze flicked toward the server, still kneeling by the broken glass. "Stand up straight," Valerie snapped across the room, sharp enough to carry. "You're embarrassing the foundation." The server flinched. Maya felt her jaw tighten. She moved toward the girl, but halfway there, a different sound cracked the air. Something soft, but sharp enough to grab every nearby ear. A gasp, then another. Maya turned. Ethan Willard Jr., cheeks flushed, an unsettling shade had backed into an older man near the refreshments table. The man's wine spilled, staining Ethan's sleeve. Guests began to watch, sensing entertainment. Ethan's eyes sparked with something impulsive, desperate, dangerous. "It was your fault," Ethan hissed, voice cracking in the quiet. The older man raised his palms. "Son, relax. It's just, don't call me son." The boy snatched another glass of wine from a passing server, gripping the stem so tightly his knuckles whitened. He looked around as if searching for someone to punish. Valerie swept in, smoothing his shoulder. "It's fine, sweetheart." "Accidents happen." Richard chuckled under his breath, a private laugh meant for men who understood the currency of intimidation. But Ethan wasn't soothed. Something in him was spiraling. Fast. And Maya felt the prickle of tension that precedes disaster. "Ethan," she said, "calm, steady. Let's breathe." He froze. "Don't talk to me like you know me." "I don't," she said softly. "But I know you don't want to do something you can't take back." His breath hitched. For a moment, the boy inside the chaos flickered. Then his eyes darkened, turned somewhere else entirely. He hurled the wine at the server crouched nearby. The glass exploded. The splash hit the server's apron and face. She gasped, stumbling back. The room exhaled in horror, a slow ripple through silk and tuxedos. The girl blinked through tears, trying to breathe, trying not to break. Valerie stepped forward, expression icy. "If you're going to cry, do it somewhere else." The orchestra faltered. The lights gleamed too harshly, and Maya felt every eye searching for someone to blame. She bent to help the girl stand. Her hands were gentle. "It's all right," she whispered. "Come with me." The girl tried to apologize again, voice shaking. Maya interrupted softly. "No, not another word." When she straightened, Richard Willard stood in front of her shoulders, squared jaw tight. "You're making a scene," he said, a command disguised as concern. Maya met his stare. The room seemed to hold a collective breath, as if waiting to see whether she would bend or break. But before she could speak, another voice cut through the air, thin, brittle, terrified. "Miss Robinson." Everyone turned. A middle-aged man in a rumpled security blazer hurried toward her. His badge read, "Westmore." His eyes told a different story. Fear, apology, something close to desperation. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said, voice low, "but you need to come with me." "Now. There's something you should see." Richard stepped between them. "She's not going anywhere." The guard swallowed. His hands trembled. "Sir, this is urgent. It concerns something found in the East Wing. Your name is on the file." Richard's face drained of color. Maya noticed, and so did half the room. Valerie's fingers tightened around her clutch. Ethan watched his father with something like dread. "What file?" Richard demanded. Westmore didn't answer. He only looked at Maya again. "Please," he said softly. "You need to see this." The orchestra stopped playing entirely. Silence spilled into every corner. Something had shifted, something no one could name yet. Maya felt the room tilt, not physically, but in tension, in expectation. She looked at the young server, still trembling beside her, at Ethan's hollow eyes, at Richard's suddenly faltering composure. Then she nodded. "Lead the way." Westmore exhaled with relief and motioned toward the hallway, but as Maya followed him, she felt a cold weight settling between her shoulder blades. Not fear, recognition. Whatever waited for her in the East Wing wasn't an accident. It wasn't coincidence. It was a thread, and someone had just pulled it. Behind her, the gala resumed in hushed whispers. Richard's voice rose in sharp, frantic tones. Valerie tried to calm him. Ethan watched Maya disappear down the corridor, with a look she couldn't decipher. Something wounded. Something knowing. But Maya didn't look back. She only listened to the quick steps of the guard and the slow drum of her own heartbeat as they approached a locked door at the end of the hall. Westmore's hand shook as he unlocked it. Inside, under a dim work light, lay a folder, thin beige, unmarked, except for one name typed in small black letters. Maya Robinson. Her breath stilled. Westmore whispered voice breaking. "This wasn't here yesterday." And the security footage someone erased everything from the past 48 hours. "I thought you should know before anyone else sees it." Maya stared at the folder. Something in her chest turned cold and sharp, because she hadn't opened it yet. But she already knew. This wasn't about spilled wine. This wasn't about a boy losing control. Someone had planned something. Someone had waited for her to walk into this room, and someone wanted her to find whatever was inside that folder. She reached toward it, then stopped. Someone was watching. She could feel it. A presence. A breath against the silence. In that moment, the gala outside might as well have been miles away. The music, the laughter, the glittering wealth, all meaningless. Because here in this forgotten room, a different story had begun. A story with consequences, a story with teeth, a story that would not let anyone walk away clean. Maya stepped closer, and the lights flickered. The lights steadied, humming with a faint electrical buzz, and Maya pressed her fingertips to the edge of the folder, as if testing the temperature of something volatile. The room felt too still, too quiet, the kind of quiet that made memories sharpen. For a moment, she wasn't in the East Wing of a Chicago gala. She was a teenager again, standing in a courthouse hallway, while two men in suits whispered her future into ash. She pushed the memory aside and opened the folder. Inside were only 3 pages. The first was a photograph printed on heavy paper, a grainy shot of her meeting with a whistleblower last year, taken from a distance, someone watching her from across a parking lot. The second page was worse, a transcript of a private phone call she'd had with her chief engineer about a proprietary algorithm Helios Tech had not yet patented. The third page listed dates, locations, and 3 words typed in bold beneath potential breach investigation. Her stomach tightened, not out of fear, but recognition. Whoever planted this wanted her to react, panic retreat. They wanted to pull her into a narrative she hadn't written. She turned the pages again, looking for fingerprints of fabrication. The call transcript was precise, too precise. No misspellings, no natural gaps, synthetic, generated. A frame up, carefully wrapped as a warning. Behind her, Westmore shifted anxiously. You see why I came to you first. This was placed where the day staff would find it. That's not an accident. Who else has seen it? She asked. No one. I locked the room the moment I found it. You did the right thing, she said, though. Her mind was already moving ahead, mapping possibilities, risks, motives. Westmore lifted a hand to his throat, rubbing the collar where it pinched. There's something else. He swallowed hard. Before the footage was erased, I saw a figure enter this hallway late last night. The timestamp said 11:17. But the face, it was blurred, too clean, like it was done on purpose. Maya closed the folder. You didn't report it. His voice cracked. Mrs. Willard told me all security issues had to go through her. I didn't want to lose my job. Maya studied him, the way his eyes darted the tremor he fought to hide. Fear lived under his skin, the way it lived in many people who worked near power they didn't understand. She softened her tone. Whatever you saw, you told me now. That matters. A small knock tapped against the door behind them. Not sharp, not demanding. More like someone testing if they were alone. Westmore flinched. Maya stepped back from the desk. Open it. But the door swung inward before his hand reached the handle. Ethan Willard Jr. stood there, one hand braced against the frame. Breath uneven, as if he'd run to find her. He looked past Westmore's eyes, landing on the folder in Maya's grip. The boy who had thrown wine earlier was gone, replaced by something hollowed out. His face was tired, too pale, too aware. I need to talk to you, he said, voice low. Not here. Westmore moved to block him. Your parents said. Ethan lifted his chin with a sudden startling sharpness. My parents don't know I'm here, and if you tell them, you'll regret it. Then he turned to Maya. Please. Maya watched him for a long moment, searching his expression, the way she read data models looking for anomalies, inconsistencies, breaks in pattern. She found something instead: fear. Real fear. And a boy trying very hard not to show it. 30 seconds, she said to Westmore. If I don't come back, call security. But not the Willards detail. Call the city officers. Ethan let out a shaky breath as she stepped into the hallway. Westmore hesitated, then nodded, retreating into the room, like someone guarding a storm shelter. The hallway outside was quieter than the ballroom, but still pulsed with muffled music. Ethan walked fast, glancing over his shoulder every few steps. Maya followed, noting the tremor in his hand, the way he kept swallowing the lump in his throat, the faint red prints on his wrist fingers too large to be his. He stopped near a service corridor and leaned against the wall, closing his eyes. "You're wondering why I threw that wine," he said. "Everyone thinks I'm just like them. Like my parents." "Why did you?" she asked. "It wasn't about you." His voice thinned, tightening around some truth he didn't want to say. "It was about someone else." Maya waited. "My parents planned something tonight." His eyes flicked toward the ballroom. "Something big. Something illegal. And they needed a distraction. They always need a distraction when they're covering their tracks. So they use me. They push. They provoke. They make it look like I'm the problem. I get blamed. They stay clean. Why tell me this now?" Maya asked quietly. "Because it's worse this time." His breath shuddered. "They're trying to frame you." Maya's grip tightened around the folder. Ethan pressed both hands against his face, then dragged them down slowly. "I saw my father with a man I didn't recognize. They were talking about you, about shutting you down before you got too close." I didn't understand. But then the folder, someone slipped a copy into my backpack. They thought I wouldn't look. Maya exhaled slowly. "What's in your copy?" "The same photo," he whispered. "But there's a fourth page. It has coordinates, dates. Something about a research site Helios Tech hasn't announced yet." Maya's pulse kicked. "How would they have that?" Ethan shook his head. "I don't know. But they told me tonight would set everything in motion." A door slammed somewhere behind them. Ethan flinched again, instinctive, like someone who had learned to brace for impact. Maya catalogued that reaction, too. "Show me your copy," she said. Ethan hesitated, then pulled a folded sheet from his jacket pocket and handed it to her. The page was creased, smudged, and trembling between her fingers as she unfolded it. Coordinates, dates, a coded reference to a confidential lab in Colorado where Helios Tech tested a groundbreaking climate algorithm. Only 5 people knew of its existence, which meant one thing: there was a leak inside her company. She raised her gaze to Ethan. His eyes were glossy with fear that didn't come from teenage rebellion, but from something bruised deeper. "There's more," he whispered. "You weren't supposed to find that folder tonight." "Not yet." They meant to release something to the press tomorrow. Something bigger. Something about you and your past. Maya's breath left her in a single cold exhale. "What about my past?" "I don't know," he said, voice cracking. "Only that my mother said you wouldn't survive it twice." Maya felt the old courthouse memory surge like a ghost clawing up her spine, the one she spent years locking behind steel doors in her mind. The boy watched her carefully, waiting for her anger, her denial, her explosion. But she didn't move. Footsteps turned the corner. Heavy, urgent, Richard Willard's voice cut through the hall. "Ethan." The boy froze. His pupils shrank. The breath left his body. Richard appeared adjusting his cufflinks with the kind of controlled fury only powerful men perfected. His glare moved from Ethan to Maya, then back to Ethan. "What exactly?" he said, voice like a scalpel. "Are you doing here?" Ethan stood rigid, like someone pinned by a spotlight. Maya stepped forward before he could speak. "We were discussing the incident earlier." He wanted to apologize. Richard's eyes cut to her. "My son doesn't apologize. He does tonight," Maya said. For a single instant, they stared at each other, two forces orbiting the same battlefield from opposite ends. Richard's jaw flexed. A muscle ticked near his eye. Then he gave Ethan a sharp nudge toward the ballroom, back inside. Ethan hesitated just long enough to send Maya a message with his eyes, something between warning and plea. Then he disappeared around the corner. Richard waited until the boy was gone. Then he stepped closer, invading the space between them, until she could smell the faint metallic scent of his cologne, a cold alloy meant to signal power. "You're playing a dangerous game, Maya." She didn't blink. "I don't play games." He smiled, thin and poisonous. "Yes, that's what makes you predictable." He turned, adjusting his jacket, then paused. "You should leave," he said, without looking back. "Before someone decides you've overstayed your welcome." The hallway felt colder after he left, as if he carried warmth with him on purpose. Maya stood there a long moment, feeling the weight of the folder, Ethan's trembling voice, the coordinates burning through the page like a fuse. She folded the papers slowly, carefully, and for the first time that night, she felt it. Not fear, not anger. Recognition. Someone had opened a door she thought she'd sealed forever. Someone wanted her broken before dawn. Someone was betting she wouldn't fight back this time. They were wrong. She turned toward the ballroom, toward the music and the glass, and the polite voices already rewriting the next move in her mind. The night was far from over, and the war hadn't even begun. Maya stepped back into the ballroom, as if stepping onto a stage she hadn't agreed to perform on. The air was warmer here, thick with perfume and expensive champagne, but it couldn't melt the cold settling in her chest. Every chandelier seemed brighter, every laugh sharper, every violin stroke stretched thin like a taut wire ready to snap. Faces turned toward her, curious, judgmental, greedy for gossip. In rooms like this, truth rarely mattered. Perception always did. From across the marble floor, Valerie Willard watched her return with the measured gaze of a woman who had never lost a social battle. Her lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, more the acknowledgement of a worthy enemy stepping back into the ring. Richard had rejoined her, his posture, rigid jaw tight, but he masked it well beneath small talk with a senator whose name hovered just outside Maya's memory. Ethan stood behind them, half-shadowed by a pillar eyes, flicking between Maya and his father, with the anxious rhythm of someone trapped between loyalty and terror. Maya refused to look away first. She crossed the room, moving past donors and executives who parted for her with the instinctive politeness reserved for people whose status they hadn't yet confirmed. Her heels echoed softly, steady, controlled. She found the young server from earlier, standing near the back wall, now wearing a clean apron. Her hands trembled as she arranged small plates on a passing tray. Maya approached her gently. "Are you all right?" she asked. The girl looked up, startled. Up close, her eyes were red from crying, though she tried to mask it with a brittle smile. "I'm fine, Mom." "Really? They gave me a break." "And you came back?" Maya asked. The girl swallowed. "I need the hours." Maya exhaled slowly. Beneath the surface of power rooms like this were built on invisible bones. People like this girl holding everything upright while being blamed for the cracks. "What's your name, Carla?" she whispered. Carla Maya repeated, committing the name to memory the way she always had with people who faced danger without protection. "If anything like that ever happens again, you call me." She slipped her card into the girl's hand, closing her fingers around it. "Don't apologize. Ever." Carla nodded, eyes glistening with gratitude and disbelief. Maya turned away, aware of Valerie watching the exchange, like someone observing a move in a chess game she didn't understand yet. Valerie raised her champagne flute to her lips, but her hand tightened just slightly on the stem. The orchestra shifted into a softer melody. The host stepped onto the stage, tapping the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, in a few moments we'll begin tonight's recognition ceremony. Please take your seats." People drifted towards their tables. A waiter approached Maya. "Ms. Robinson, your seat is this way." She followed him toward a table near the front, seating reserved for honorees and major donors. As she approached something at her place, setting caught her eye. A small envelope, cream-colored, unmarked. Her pulse sharpened. The waiter hesitated. It was already there when we set the table. Maya nodded slightly. "Thank you." She sat waiting until he left before touching the envelope. It felt cold, as if it had been placed moments earlier. She slid a finger under the seal. Inside was a single Polaroid photograph. Her breath thinned. It was a picture of her father. Taken decades ago, outside the courthouse, the day he was led away in handcuffs. A day she tried to bury so deep she could pretend it belonged to someone else. Across the bottom of the photo, written in pen, "You can't outrun your bloodline." She flipped the photo over. A time written in block letters, 11:59 tonight. And a message, "If you don't show up, someone else pays the price." Her heartbeat changed rhythm, steady to sharp. A countdown she hadn't known she was on suddenly felt very real. A chair slid out beside her. Councilman Harper, a man with a paunch and a lifetime of political calculation etched into his features, took a seat. "Evening, Maya. Always good to see you at these things." She forced a polite nod. "Councilman." "You seem tense," he said, adjusting his tie. "Everything all right, fine," she said. But her mind was churning. Harper leaned in with the heavy breath of someone who'd spent too many years around cheap cigars. "I hear whispers, you know. Doors talk if you listen. You want a friendly warning." She looked at him, cautious. "What kind of warning?" "There's chatter your company's about to face a regulatory review. Federal. Big one. Tied to some leak or breach." He shrugged. "Probably just rumors. But rumors in this town have teeth." Her jaw tightened. "Where did you hear that?" He smiled, the kind that never reached his eyes. "Same place everyone hears everything. From people who want you nervous." The stage lights brightened. A spotlight swept the room. The host called the gala to order. Maya folded the Polaroid back into the envelope with slow precision and slipped it into her clutch. Her mind moved like machinery connecting Ethan's warning, the planted folder, the erased footage, and now this photograph sent to her publicly, confidently inside a ballroom full of cameras. Something larger was at play, something coordinated. As the host began introducing honorees, Maya excused herself from the table. "Restroom," she murmured. Harper barely glanced her way. "Good." She walked briskly through the side corridor, heels clicking against marble. The hallway split into 3 directions, lobby service wing and private courtyard. She turned toward the courtyard, quieter, darker, easier to spot anyone watching. Cool air met her as she stepped outside. The courtyard was lit by soft sconces along the stone walls, shadows pooling under the trimmed hedges. A fountain trickled somewhere in the center. She scanned the space. Right on time. The voice came from the shadowed archway near the far wall. A tall figure stepped forward, pulling back the hood of a dark coat. Her breath caught. Not from fear. From recognition. Lewis. Her brother. Older by 2 years. Estranged for 10. A ghost she thought she'd buried with the rest of her childhood. He looked worn, thinner than she remembered, eyes ringed with exhaustion. His hands flexed at his sides, restless and nervous. "I didn't want to do it like this," he said, "but they gave me no choice." She stared at him, her pulse relentless. "You're the one sending the messages." "No," he said quickly. "I'm delivering them." He reached into his coat. She tensed, but he pulled out another envelope. He held it up, shaking slightly. "I brought this because I need you to understand. They're not just coming for your company. This is personal." She didn't reach for the envelope. "Who are they?" "Lewis." He looked past her toward the ballroom windows, the golden light spilling onto the courtyard stone. "People who know about Dad. People who know what he did, and what he didn't do. People who know why I disappeared." The fountain gurgled louder, or maybe her blood did. "What does any of that have to do with me?" Lewis swallowed, throat bobbing. "Because they think you have something. Records, files, evidence he hid. They think he passed it to you before his voice faltered, before everything fell apart. That's impossible," she said. "Dad never sent me anything." Lewis's gaze was raw, desperate. "Then they think you can find it." Maya stepped closer, lowering her voice. "What's in that envelope, Lewis?" He looked down at it, thumb brushing the seal. "Proof that you're already under investigation. Proof that someone inside your company is feeding information to them. Proof that a sound split the air. A soft metallic click, not loud enough to echo, but familiar. A gun slide being drawn back. Lewis froze. His eyes widened, fear apology something breaking open. "Get down," Maya whispered, but the shot came before either of them moved. A sharp crack shattered the quiet courtyard. Lewis staggered backward, hand clutching his shoulder as he fell to one knee. The envelope slipped from his grasp, drifting toward the fountain like a wounded bird. Maya dropped beside him, pressing her hand to the bleeding wound. His breath hitched pain clawing through him. "It's not lethal," he gasped. "Warning shot. They want you scared." She scanned the courtyard for movement, shadows shifting behind hedges, but no figure emerged. Whoever fired the shot knew the angles, knew the timing, knew she couldn't chase them without abandoning Lewis. He gripped her wrist, his fingers cold. "Don't trust anyone at Helios Tech. Not your board, not your directors. One of them is working with the Willards." Her chest tightened. "Which one?" He shook his head. "I don't know. But they're close to you. Close enough to reach your private files." Lewis's eyes fluttered, breath heavy. "Take the envelope," he whispered. "Run." Maya reached for it, but a gust of courtyard wind caught the paper, pushing it just beyond her fingertips. She lunged, grabbing it before it touched the fountain's water. She held it close. Lights flicked on in the ballroom above as guests rose to applaud the next award recipient. The applause echoed through the courtyard like a cruel joke. Maya lifted Lewis to his feet, bracing his weight. His blood warmed her palm through her dress. His breath trembled against her shoulder. Somewhere above, violins swelled again. Inside her chest, something colder than fear settled. They weren't just trying to ruin her. They were trying to rewrite her past. And they had just drawn first blood. Lewis's blood left a dark smear across Maya's wrist as she pushed open the service door with her shoulder, dragging him into the narrow hallway behind the ballroom kitchens. The scent of roasted lamb and citrus glaze drifted through the corridor, absurdly ordinary against the iron tang on her hands. A dishwasher looked up in surprise, water cascading from a rack of plates he held mid-air. His eyes widened at the sight of Lewis stumbling, half collapsing against her. "Don't call anyone." Maya said sharply, her voice low but commanding. "Just point me to the quietest room you have." He hesitated only a second before nodding toward a storage pantry at the end of the hall. Maya nodded. Once thanks, apology, reassurance, all compressed into a single glance, then half carried her brother inside and closed the door behind them. The pantry was cramped, lined with metal shelves, stacked with linens and sealed jars. The fluorescent light flickered overhead, a weak buzz cutting through the silence. Lewis slumped onto an overturned crate, pressing his uninjured hand to his forehead, as if trying to hold himself together with sheer pressure. "Let me see," Maya said. "No," he breathed. "It's just a graze. You're bleeding through your jacket. It was meant to." His voice was thin but steady, and the look he gave her wasn't fear anymore, it was warning. "They wanted to prove they could reach me," he said. "Reach you." Maya knelt, peeling back the torn fabric of his coat. The wound was shallow, but messy. A clean graze, like he said, but close. Too close. Whoever had fired aimed inches from killing him. She took a steady breath. "You need a hospital." "No hospital," he said quickly. "Not tonight. They'll be watching the logs, tracking who you contact. They want to see who you run to. I'm not going to let you bleed out in a pantry." "I'm fine." He wasn't, but he held her gaze, as if holding the truth in place by force. "There's more at stake here than my shoulder." Maya swallowed hard and reached for a clean linen from a shelf. She tore it, wrapped the fabric around the wound, tied it tight. Lewis hissed but didn't pull away. "Start talking," she said. All of it this time. Lewis leaned back against the shelves, eyes closing for a moment, as if he could rebuild enough strength to speak. When he opened them again, there was something in his expression Maya hadn't seen since they were children, regret wrapped in determination. "Dad didn't destroy those documents," he said quietly. "He hid them." Maya's pulse stuttered. Documents about what about the Willards? About a financial network they built through shell companies, political favors, illegal land transfers. Your algorithm is just the beginning. They want to bury the past and the future in one clean sweep. He drew a shaky breath. Dad found inconsistencies when he worked for them. Years before, everything went public. He never said anything. Maya said, voice hollow, because he thought he could fix it. He thought he could protect us. Lewis swallowed, but when he realized how deep it went, he tried to go to the authorities. Someone tipped the Willards off. They made sure he got blamed for crimes he was trying to expose. The fluorescent light hummed above them. Maya stared at her brother, memories rearranging themselves with brutal clarity. "Why didn't you tell me this before you were 18? He said. "You were just starting your life." And his fingers twitched against his knee. "I wasn't strong enough to do what he asked me to do." "What did he ask you to do?" Lewis reached into his pocket with trembling fingers and pulled out the envelope. He still clutched the edges, now stained red. Maya opened it carefully. Inside were photocopies, faded smudged of documents, stamped with dates older than her adult life. Cross-referenced names, offshore transfers. A handwritten note in their father's script. "If anything happens to me, they'll come for you." Her chest tightened. A memory flickered their father's hand on her shoulder. The week before, everything fell apart. His eyes strangely soft, almost pleading. She hadn't understood it then. She did now. Lewis watched her. "He trusted you. More than me. More than anyone." "That doesn't make sense," she whispered. "I was barely an adult. You were smarter than both of us," Lewis said. "And you didn't owe the Willards anything. He thought you'd see what he couldn't face. Something inside her cracked open like ice, giving way beneath weight. They think I know where he hid the originals. Lewis nodded, wincing as his shoulder throbbed. And they won't stop until they get them. A knock sounded on the pantry door. Soft, polite, horrifying. Maya's breath froze. Lewis tensed, eyes wide. A voice drifted through the wood, gentle, cultured, unmistakably dangerous. Ms. Robinson, are you in there? We've been looking everywhere for you. Richard Willard. Lewis mouthed one word. Run. Maya stood silently smoothing the linen skirt of her gown, forcing her breath to steady. When she spoke, her voice was calm, controlled, perfectly neutral. One moment. She looked at Lewis. Stay behind those crates. Don't move. Don't make a sound. He nodded. Maya unlocked the door and opened it only a few inches. Richard stood in the dim hallway, his expression arranged into courteous concern. But his eyes flicked over her shoulder, searching, calculating. He smelled faintly of bourbon and cold ambition. There you are, he said. I was afraid something had unsettled you. She smiled faintly. Just needed a moment. Alone, he asked. Her grip tightened on the door. Is there a problem with that? His smile stayed still rigid at the edges. Of course not. But when a guest of honor disappears, it causes questions. Questions. Threats disguised as manners. Behind the crates, a faint shift of weight, Lewis trying not to breathe too loudly. Richard's gaze sharpened. I hope everything is all right. Everything's fine, Maya said. If there's nothing else. He leaned slightly closer. There's a matter we should discuss before the night is over. His voice dipped lower. Your presence tomorrow morning will be expected. Expected by whom? A committee of people who value transparency. His smile widened a fraction. And accountability. Maya felt the Polaroid inside her clutch like a burning coal. I'll keep my schedule flexible, she said coolly. Richard gave a small nod, satisfied enough for now, and stepped back. You've always been poised under pressure. I admire that. It will make what's coming easier to navigate. And then he walked away, the echo of his footsteps lingering long after he turned the corner. Maya closed the door quietly, locking it again. Lewis emerged from behind the crates, breath uneven. He knows you're on to something. No, Maya said. He knows I'm not afraid of him anymore. Lewis sagged onto the crate again. The linen around his wound was beginning to soak through. She crouched beside him, pressing new pressure against the bandage. What do we do now? He whispered. Maya stared at the envelope, her father's handwriting blurring under the pantry lights. Somewhere above them, applause erupted for another award recipient, laughter floating down like false music. We finish what Dad started, she said. But we do it on my terms. Lewis looked at her, fear and hope tangled in one expression. You don't even know where he hid the originals? No, Maya said softly. But someone does. Lewis frowned. Who? She stood helping him to his feet. The Willards aren't the only ones with secrets, and not the only ones who cracked under pressure. She reached for her phone fingers, steady eyes colder, now sharper. Tomorrow morning, she said, I'm going to visit someone who owes my father the truth. Lewis blinked. Maya's jaw tightened as she answered. The man who testified against him. The sun had not yet risen when Maya stepped out of the black sedan and onto the cracked sidewalk of West Ellery Street. The neighborhood sat hushed beneath a pale blue dawn, the kind of morning light that made everything look softer than it really was. But nothing about this place was soft. Not the boarded windows, Not the sagging porches, not the faint metallic smell drifting up from the gutter. It had been years since Maya last set foot here, but her memory recognized the cold before her body did. Lewis walked slowly beside her, his arm bound tight beneath a fresh bandage. The night's bleeding had stopped, but exhaustion clung to him like a second skin. He shivered despite the heavy coat she insisted he wear. "You don't have to come in," she murmured. He stared at the peeling paint of the duplex ahead. "I was there the day Dad was sentenced." His voice strained at the edges. "I should be here for this too." She didn't argue. They approached the door together. Maya knocked once, twice, a third time, at first silence. Then a latch slid, a chain rattled, and the door opened only a few inches. A man's face appeared older than she remembered, features drooping under the weight of too many sleepless nights. His hair had thinned, gone grey at the temples, but his eyes were the same, a dull, anxious blue that darted everywhere, except where they were supposed to. Mr. Hanley Maya said, her tone level. "We need to talk." Gregory Hanley swallowed hard. "Maya." "I wasn't expecting, I know," she said. "Open the door." He hesitated, scanning the street as though someone might leap out from behind a garbage can. Then he stepped back and unlatched the chain. The smell of old carpet and stale coffee drifted out. "Come in," he whispered. The living room was dim, curtains drawn. A single lamp lit the cluttered space stacks of newspapers, binders, envelopes, and boxes labeled with shaky handwriting. Hanley motioned to the worn couch. "Sit. Please." Maya shook her head. "I'd rather stand." Lewis remained by the door, watching the windows. Hanley rubbed both hands over his face, sinking into an armchair that looked ready to collapse. "I suppose you're here because of what happened all those years ago." "What happened," Maya said quietly, "is that my father went to prison for crimes he didn't commit, and you helped put him there." Hanley flinched. His gaze fell to the stained carpet, shame crawling across his posture. "I didn't have a choice. Everyone has choices," Maya said. "You chose the Willards." "No," he whispered. "I chose survival." He looked at her, then really looked at her, and his eyes shimmered with old fear. "You weren't supposed to know my name. You weren't supposed to come here. The Willards," they said, "if I ever broke the agreement, if I ever talked, they'd make sure I disappeared. And after what they did to your father, I believed them." Maya stepped closer to him, her voice steady, intentional. "Mr. Hanley, someone shot my brother last night. They framed me for a breach at my company, and they planted evidence inside the gala. The Willards aren't warning people anymore. They're hunting." Hanley's hands clenched the fabric of his pants. "Then you should run." "I'm not running." He blinked, startled by the firmness of her voice. "I came because I think you know where my father hid the original documents," she continued. "The ones that could expose everything." Hanley shook his head violently. "No. No, I don't." Maya stepped closer until she stood directly over him. "Don't lie to me. You were the only other person he trusted, the only person he confided in at the end. You knew he wasn't guilty. And you testified anyway." A small broken sound escaped his throat. "I didn't testify because I thought he was guilty," he whispered. "I testified because they threatened my daughter. She was 6 at the time. Valerie Willard told me exactly what would happen to her if I didn't follow their script." Maya's chest tightened. Lewis cursed under his breath. "That doesn't excuse what you did," Maya said. Hanley nodded faintly. "I know." Silence crept in, thick and suffocating. Outside, a dog barked somewhere down the block. Maya took the Polaroid from her coat pocket and held it up. Someone left this for me at the gala, along with a meeting time. They're reopening what happened to my father, and they're using you as leverage." Hanley stared at the photograph, his hand lifted as if he wanted to touch it, then dropped. "They know everything," he whispered. "They know where your father hid the master file." Maya's heartbeat sharpened. "Where?" He didn't answer. Not right away. Instead, he stood, shakily, walked to one of the cardboard boxes and dug through its contents. Paper rustled. Something clattered. Finally, he pulled out a small metal object, a key. He held it between two trembling fingers. "Before the sentencing, your father gave this to me. He said if anything ever happened to him, I was to make a choice one day. A choice to tell the truth or bury it forever." Maya reached out. "Give it to me." Hanley closed his fist around the key, wordlessly. Tears welled at the corners of his eyes. "He didn't deserve what we did to him," he whispered. "But if I hand this over now, they'll kill me." Lewis stepped forward. "If you don't hand it over, they'll kill her." Hanley's eyes snapped to Maya, and something inside him crumbled. After a long breath, he placed the key into her palm. It was cold, heavier than it looked. "It opens a safety deposit box," he said, "in a bank in Boulder. Your father rented it under a false name. He kept the originals there, documents, photos, recordings, enough to bring down anyone connected to the Willards." Maya closed her hand around the key. "What name was the box registered under?" she asked. Hanley hesitated. "Gregory," he said quietly. "Gregory Lewis." Lewis inhaled sharply. "Dad used my name. He trusted you both," Hanley said, more than he trusted himself. Before Maya could speak, a loud metallic thud struck the front door. Hanley's face drained of color. No, not today." Another thud, harder. Maya's mind snapped to the shot that hit Lewis the night before. Warning shots didn't last forever. "They followed us," she said. Lewis locked the deadbolt, bracing the door with his shoulder. "We need to leave. Now." Hanley shook his head, backing away from the windows. "There's a back exit through the basement, but they'll be watching both exits. They always glass shattered in the kitchen." A brick rolled across the linoleum. Lewis grabbed Hanley by the arm and forced him toward the hallway. "Move, Hanley!" stumbled panic, overtaking what little composure he had left. "They said if I talked, then we don't let them find you," Maya said. They reached the narrow basement stairs when the front door burst open behind them. Heavy boots hit the floor, the sound of men moving with purpose, with training. Maya shoved Hanley down the stairs, then pushed Lewis after him. She kept her hand on the rail, listening. One step creaked above. A voice she recognized spoke softly. "Spread out. Don't damage anything we need." Richard Willard. Maya's breath locked in her chest. Lewis reached for her hand from the bottom of the stairs. "Come on." She followed them into the basement. The air was colder damp. Boxes lined the walls. Hanley pointed to a rusted metal door near the floor, a half-sized storm hatch. "There," he whispered. "Crawl through. It leads to the alley." Lewis dropped to his knees and pushed the hatch open. Night air rushed in cold sharp, filled with the hum of distant traffic. "Go," Maya said. Lewis disappeared first. Hanley followed, trembling. Maya crawled in last, but before slipping through, she heard Richard's voice drift down the stairs. "You can't hide her forever. She'll choose wrong. They always do." She closed the hatch behind her, sealing the darkness inside. In the alley, Lewis helped pull her out. Hanley pointed down the block. "My neighbor keeps her car unlocked. She works nights. You can take it." Maya grabbed his arm. "You're coming with us." Hanley shook his head. "No, they won't shoot me if I'm alone. They still need me. They will kill you." "Maybe." But if they think you took me, it buys you time." He pressed something else into her hand, a slip of paper with a bank box number. "Find it." "Before they do." Then he ran back toward the basement door. Lewis cursed, grabbing Maya's arm. "We can't stay." She nodded once, clutching the key tight enough to cut her palm. The alley stretched long and empty ahead of them, and somewhere behind them, a man who once testified against her father was walking back into danger. Maya looked at the key again, feeling its weight. Everything her father tried to expose, everything that cost him his life, was now in her hand, and the Willards were closer than ever. The borrowed sedan rattled as it sped down the empty stretch of Lake Shore Drive, its engine coughing like an old smoker, the headlights barely cutting through the pre-dawn haze. Maya gripped the steering wheel hard enough that the leather groaned beneath her fingers. Beside her, Lewis slumped against the passenger door eyelids, heavy face pale beneath the weak glow of the dashboard. He wasn't dying, she told herself that, over and over, but the adrenaline that held him upright through the night was thinning, leaving tremors in its wake. "You holding up?" she asked, without looking away from the road. "Define holding," he murmured. She almost smiled. "Almost. We'll get you stitched up as soon as we're safe." "Safe," he echoed, letting the word roll bitterly off his tongue. "Where's that now?" Maya didn't answer. Ahead, Chicago's skyline flickered awake, office towers humming windows, glowing like rows of tired eyes. Dawn stretched a thin band of gold across the horizon, but the light didn't comfort her. It only marked how little time they had left. The sedan's radio crackled with static. A faint news bulletin cut through the anchor's voice, flat, indifferent. Authorities responding to an incident in the West Ellery area. No injuries reported at this time. Local residents advised. Maya snapped the radio off. Lewis swallowed. "Do you think he got away?" "No," she said quietly. "But I think he bought us time." She didn't let herself imagine what might be happening to Gregory Hanley right now. The man had lied, betrayed their father, broken under pressure, but he'd tried to atone. And in this world, redemption was a currency that rarely lasted long enough to spend. The sedan turned off the main road and into the underground garage of a quiet high-rise. They parked in a corner space, far from the security cameras. The concrete ceiling dripped condensation. Somewhere above them, life would soon begin, commuters rushing baristas, steaming milk joggers stretching beside the lake. But here at this hour, the air felt deserted, as if the entire city held its breath. "This way," Maya said, helping Lewis out of the car. The building belonged to one of her engineers, a single mother who rented the top floor and often joked about having space her children didn't use. Maya had borrowed the keys under the guise of needing a quiet place to work that weekend. She hadn't expected the lie to become a shield. They took the service elevator up, avoiding the main lobby. Lewis braced himself against the wall, breathing shallowly. "You should sit," she said. "If I sit, I won't stand again." The elevator dinged softly. Maya unlocked the apartment and guided him inside. Warmth greeted them, the lingering scent of cinnamon from last night's baking children's drawings, taped to the refrigerator, an overturned toy dinosaur on the carpet. It felt painfully normal. Maya helped Lewis to the couch, then moved to the kitchen to search for supplies. Cabinet doors clicked open and shut until she found a first aid kit nearly overflowing with cartoon-themed bandages. She carried it back. "Don't laugh," Lewis muttered when she peeled open a bandage covered in smiling turtles. "It's temporary," she said. He hissed when she cleaned the wound, but he stayed still. When she tightened the wrap again, his breath steadied. Better, he whispered. Maya sat beside him, elbows on her knees. She stared at the small metal key resting on the coffee table. It looked harmless. But so did a trigger before it moved. "What do you remember about Dad's case?" she asked. Lewis rubbed his forehead. "Not much. Courtrooms, reporters. Dad telling us everything would be fine, even when it clearly wouldn't. And before that, he shifted eyes, clouding. He took a trip to Colorado the month before he got arrested, said he was visiting a client. But when he came back, he was different. Quiet. Almost relieved. Like he'd handed off a weight he couldn't carry anymore. The weight was the documents, Maya said. Lewis nodded faintly. He must have realized he wouldn't survive if he kept them. And he didn't want the Willards to bury them. Maya reached for the key, turning it slowly between her fingers. "He registered the deposit box under your name." "Gregory Lewis," he said softly. "I used to hate that name. Now it might save us." Footsteps in the hallway made both of them stiffen. Maya stood silently listening. The steps were light. Too light to be police. Too soft to be men sent by Richard. A moment later, a pair of small fists knocked against the door. "Mum," a child's voice called. "Mum, I forgot my backpack." Lewis exhaled in relief. "Stay quiet," Maya whispered. The child knocked again, impatient. A deeper voice echoed down the hall. "Sarah, sweetheart, your mum isn't home. But she said it'd be right here." A set of keys jingled. Doors opened. A father ushered his daughter away. Maya waited until silence settled again, then sank back onto the couch. "We can't stay here for long." Lewis nodded. "What's the plan?" "First we go to O'Hare. Not to fly, just to lose any tail. Then we take a rental car to Boulder. No credit cards. Cash only. That'll take hours. We don't have another option." Her phone buzzed on the table. A number she recognized. Her chief operations officer. She stared at the screen, not answering. After a moment, it buzzed again. A voicemail notification blinked. Lewis frowned. He could help, or he could be the leak, she said. He hesitated. "Do you really think someone from your board?" "Yes," she said, without pause. "One of them fed the Willards information about our Colorado research. That didn't come from random surveillance." The phone buzzed once more. She sent it to voicemail. Then the apartment lights flickered. A soft surge. Barely noticeable. But not accidental. Lewis straightened. "Did you see that?" She nodded slowly. "Power grid interruption." "No," he said, shaking his head. "That wasn't the building. That was internal." Maya rose to her feet and crossed to the window. The city outside glowed normally, streetlights, steady traffic signals blinking. Everything seemed undisturbed, except here. This apartment. She turned off the lamp. Waited. The kitchen light flicked back on by itself. A cold ripple crossed her spine. "They traced my phone," she whispered. Lewis cursed, pushing himself up. "We need to leave. Now." Maya grabbed the car keys, the deposit box key, her coat. She helped him to the elevator. But as the door slid shut, a voice echoed faintly down the stairwell. "Ms." Robinson, a man's voice. Calm, polite, terrifying. Footsteps followed, measured, confident. Lewis whispered, "Is that no?" she said. Not Richard. Someone worse. Someone she hadn't realized was involved. The elevator doors closed before the footsteps reached them. They descended in silence, aware that each floor passed was one less shield. When the elevator opened into the garage, Maya scanned the shadows. Rows of parked cars. Pools of darkness where headlights couldn't reach. They moved toward the sedan. "Don't turn on the lights," she murmured. They got in. Maya started the engine, But before she could shift into reverse, something fluttered onto the windshield, a single sheet of paper. Lewis froze. "Is that?" She switched on the wipers. The paper slid down. Words written in heavy black ink glared back. "We know where you're going." Maya's pulse sharpened, cold and clean. Then the sedan's headlights flickered twice. Another vehicle in the far corner flashed its lights in response. An engine rumbled. Lewis gripped the dashboard. "They're here." "No," Maya said, putting the car in drive. "They're hunting." She slammed her foot on the pedal. The sedan tore out of the garage. Streetlights streaked past in a blur, and somewhere behind them the engine that had rumbled came alive, closing distance fast. Boulder wasn't hours away. It was a battlefield waiting for them, and the war had finally begun. The sedan shot north toward the Eisenhower, like a frightened animal breaking from a trap, its tires screeching as Maya threaded between early morning delivery trucks. The pursuing SUV stayed 3 car lengths behind, refusing to fall back, refusing to overtake predatory, deliberate. Lewis pressed his palm against the dashboard, bracing himself every time Maya swerved. His breath came fast, shallow, but his eyes were alert, now sharpened by fear, by necessity. "Don't take the highway," he said quietly. "They'll box us in." "I know." Maya cut right, taking a ramp that fed into a narrow industrial corridor of warehouses and loading docks. Pallet-sat abandoned forklifts, lined up like sleeping metal animals, the sky above painted in streaks of pewter. The place looked deserted, but Maya knew better. These blocks never slept. Someone always watched. The SUV followed. Its engine growled low and patient, like it had all the time in the world. Maya killed her headlights and swung the sedan into a side street lined with dumpsters. Steam curled from manhole covers, swirling in front of them like ghostly curtains. The SUV slowed as it approached the entrance. Lewis whispered, "They're not amateurs." "No," she murmured. "They're not." She let the SUV pass. Its taillights burned red through the fog before fading into the distance. Lewis wiped sweat from his temples. "Now what?" "We don't go to Boulder yet," Maya said. "First we need to disappear." He frowned. "Disappear where somewhere no one would think to look for us." She reached into the glove compartment and pulled out an old, scratched key card. Dad's old plant in Joliet. He kept an office there. And if I'm right, he also kept a backup set of notes. Lewis turned the keycard over slowly. "You never mentioned that. I never had proof until now." She switched the sedan back on and pulled out from behind the dumpsters. They drove in silence, the city gradually softening behind them as they moved toward the flatlands and aging smokestacks on the horizon. Factory skeletons loomed in the distance, rusted frames, standing like battered giants against the rising sun. The road cracked beneath the tires' weeds, pushing through concrete seams. It felt like another world, one that had died long before they were born. Lewis pressed a hand to his ribs. Why would Dad hide anything here? Because he thought no one cared about this place anymore, Maya said. And because this is where he realized what the Willards were doing. Lewis stared out the window as forgotten neighborhoods slid past brick houses, sagging windows, boarded yards, overgrown. Feels like a place the world just left behind. "It is," Maya said, her voice softening. "That's why it's perfect." When they reached the plant's chain-link gate, Maya climbed out, lifting the sagging latch until it clicked open. The wind carried the smell of damp steel and the faint tang of chemicals, long buried under concrete. Birds nested in rafters, their cries echoing through broken windows. Inside, the plant felt frozen in time, papers scattered across desks, a half-drunk cup of coffee fossilized on a workbench, blueprints yellowed at the edges. Lewis ran a finger over a dust-coated table. "Dad loved this place," he said. Said it taught him how machines think. Maya didn't reply. She was scanning the walls, looking for the hidden panel she'd seen only once when she was 12. Near the back, behind a row of old milling equipment, she found it a rusted metal door, half hidden behind an emergency shut-off panel. She knelt and wiped away grime. Faint numbers appeared beneath her fingertips. Her birthday. She typed the sequence into the keypad beside it. The lock clicked. Lewis exhaled long and slow. "He trusted you. He trusted us both," Maya said. The door groaned as she pushed it open. Inside was a cramped office, windowless and cold. Filing cabinets lined the walls. A small metal safe sat under the desk. And in the center of the room, illuminated by a single skylight, rested a worn leather journal. Lewis lifted it gently, as if it might crumble. "This is his handwriting." Maya opened the cover. Inside were pages of notes, dates, locations, coded references, hand-sketched diagrams of a network they had only begun to understand. Words underlined repeatedly: triangulation, transfer, protocols, ghost accounts, silent partners. "It's bigger than the Willards," Maya murmured. Dad wasn't investigating just one family. He was tracking a whole system. Lewis's voice dropped to a whisper. "So the people chasing us are part of something that doesn't want to be seen." Before she could say more, a faint hum filled the room. Lewis froze. You hear that Maya moved to the windowless back wall. The hum grew louder, a mechanical whine building from below the floor. Then the lights flickered. Someone had activated the building's dormant backup generator. Lewis grabbed the journal. "We need to go." Maya shut the safe and locked the office. They made their way back through the plant footsteps, soft against the dust. Outside, the air had shifted. Charged alert. She scanned the lot. Empty. Too empty. The sedan sat where they'd left it, shadowed under a broken street lamp. As they approached, something glinted on the roof. A single earpiece. Not theirs. Lewis whispered, "They're here." Maya's pulse spiked. "Move." They ran. A voice echoed across the lot, amplified by metal and open air. Calm. Controlled. Ms. Robinson. Mr. Hayes. Leaving so soon, Lewis ducked behind an old forklift. Maya crouched against the concrete barrier. The voice came again. "We're not here to hurt you. We just want what belongs to us." Maya felt the heat of anger rise in her chest. "That journal isn't yours." A pause. Then a low, unsettling chuckle. "Oh, Maya, it was never your father's either." A shadow moved atop the catwalk overhead. Tall, confident hands resting casually on the railing. She recognized the silhouette the moment the rising sun caught the profile. She felt her breath lock. Her COO. The man she'd built her company with. The man who'd stood next to her through funding rounds and sleepless nights. The man she trusted more than anyone outside her family. Lewis whispered her name, but she couldn't answer. The COO smiled down at them. Not warm, not human. "You've been chasing ghosts," he said. "But I'm the one standing in front of you." Maya steadied herself, forcing her voice to remain cold. "What do you want? Everything your father died to protect." He spread his arms as the generator roared, fully awake, flooding the plant with industrial lights. "And everything you've spent your life building." Lewis tried to rise, but Maya pushed him back down. Footsteps approached from both sides, boots crunching gravel. The COO's smile widened. "You're outnumbered, outplayed, out of time." Maya rose from behind the barrier hands, steady eyes locked on him. "No," she said quietly. "Not yet." Because she had seen something he hadn't, the plant's old fuse box, half corroded, resting directly under his platform. One switch, one overloaded line, one fall. She stepped toward it. The COO raised a hand, signaling his men. "Maya, don't." But she wasn't listening. She reached the fuse box, and without hesitation, she slammed the master lever down. Sparks exploded. The catwalk shuddered. Metal shrieked, and the man she once trusted lurched as the platform beneath him gave way. The whole building ignited with a sound like tearing steel. Lewis shouted her name. The lights exploded overhead, and the catwalk collapsed in a shower of sparks, swallowing the COO in a roaring cloud of dust and twisted metal. Maya didn't look away. Not until the echo settled. Not until she was sure he wasn't climbing back out. Then she turned to Lewis. "Car! Now!" They ran as the building groaned behind them, metal collapsing like a dying beast. They reached the sedan, slammed the doors shut, and floored the engine. Only when they reached the open road again did Lewis speak, voice thin. "What now?" Maya tightened her grip on the wheel. "Now," she said, "we go to Boulder." The sun climbed behind them. Ahead, the mountains waited, and somewhere along the highway, carved through them, the truth waited too sharper, darker, and far deadlier than anything they had faced so far. The two-lane highway bent along the edge of the prairie like a dark ribbon, losing its fight against the spreading daylight. Maya kept the sedan at a steady 70, her fingers locked around the wheel, her jaw tense. Lewis slumped against the window, but he wasn't sleeping. His eyes stayed open, fixed on the mountains rising in the distance, violet shapes bruising the horizon. "They won't think we went this way," he said finally. "They will," Maya answered. "But they won't get here before we reach Boulder." The White Pines exit sign flashed past them. The wind buffeted the car, carrying the smell of pine cold earth and wildfire ash from somewhere far west. The roads were empty, except for a few early trucks hauling livestock. It should have felt safe, but the world had narrowed to the small circle of headlights ahead of them and the heavy silence between them. Lewis rubbed the back of his neck. "Do you think he's dead?" "No," Maya said. "Men like him don't die that easily." She didn't say what she feared, that the collapse bought them hours at best, not days. They reached Boulder just after sunrise. The city rested quietly beneath the flat irons, the air crisp and thin. Students jogged past coffee shops. Cyclists climbed long hills. Everything looked normal, mundane, in a way that almost hurt. Maya turned onto Canyon Boulevard, weaving through morning traffic until they reached a public garage near the old courthouse. "We leave the sedan," she said. "We're too exposed in it." Lewis nodded and slid out of the passenger seat. His limp was worse now. She waited, giving him time to steady himself. When he joined her at the elevator, he held out the battered leather journal. "Dad wanted you to have this," he said. "No," she replied. "He wanted us both to survive long enough to use it." They stepped out into the chill air and merged with the flow of pedestrians. Maya kept her posture loose, her pace unhurried. Lewis followed quietly, absorbing every detail of the town, as if memorizing an escape route. They cut through Pearl Street, passing buskers setting up amps and shop owners pulling metal shutters open for the day. Then Maya stopped in front of a narrow brick building sandwiched between a bookstore and a fly fishing shop. A faded sign above the door read, "McAllister Storage." Lewis frowned. "This is it, yes? Looks abandoned. That's the point." She entered the dim lobby. A small bell chimed, tinny old. Behind the counter, A woman in her 60s with steel grey hair and a flannel shirt looked up from a crossword puzzle. Her eyes narrowed when she saw Maya. "You Robinson's girl?" Maya nodded, surprised. "You knew my father long time ago." The woman scanned her from head to toe. "You have his eyes. And his trouble." Lewis shifted uncomfortably. "We don't mean to bring any trouble here. Too late," the woman cut in. "I saw the news last night." She tapped the top of her crossword pencil. "You got folks hunting you with a level of interest I don't care for." Maya steadied her voice. "All we need is access to Unit 517. The woman studied them a moment longer, then reached under the counter. A ring of keys jingled softly as she placed it down. "You get what you came for, and you leave," she said, quietly. "And you pray no one saw you walk in." Maya grabbed the keys. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Thank your father. He saved my brother's job once, back when this town still had factories and hope." "I owe him." They followed a long hallway lined with cold concrete and metal roll-up doors. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Dust motes drifted in the beams. Lewis stopped in front of Unit 517. "Ready?" "No," Maya said. "But open it anyway." The door rattled as he lifted it, revealing a small room with a single metal file cabinet, a locked trunk, and a wooden chair placed squarely in the center, as though someone intended to return. Maya approached the trunk first. The padlock was old but sturdy. She used the key from the ring, twisting until it clicked open. Inside lay a stack of sealed envelopes, each one numbered, each one labeled in her father's handwriting. Layer 1, surface corruption. Layer 2, offshore web. Layer 3, internal assets. Layer 4, the conduit. Lewis frowned. "What's the conduit?" She didn't answer. Her pulse hammered in her ears. Her father had once whispered that word during the final week before his arrest. She'd been 13. He had shut his study door and spoken into the phone in a low voice, unaware she could hear through the heating vent. "The conduit has shifted. It's inside the board. They're hiding it in plain sight. Inside the board. Inside her own company." Maya Lewis said slowly, "There's something else." He held up a thick envelope, stamped, "Do not open until after my death." Her knees weakened, but she took it. Hands steady. Breath shallow. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Maya, if you're reading this, it means they came for me, and they'll eventually come for you. The Willards are not the core. They are a mask worn by something older, quieter, and far more patient. You must assume the danger is already in your circle. Trust no one, not even the ones you believe you raised." Her throat locked, raised. She read the line again. And again. Lewis whispered, "What does that mean?" But Maya couldn't answer. The room tilted slightly. Her father was not poetic. He was literal, precise, every word chosen. Raised wasn't a metaphor. Something in her life, someone was not who they appeared to be. She folded the letter with trembling fingers. "We need to see the rest." They turned to the file cabinet. Lewis worked the lock while Maya paced her mind, racing through every face on her executive team. Every handshake, every late-night email, every board vote. The cabinet drawer slid open. Rows of files, dozens of names, companies, dates, locations, transfers. One folder stood out its tab marked in red. Robinson Acquisition. Lewis picked it up slowly. "That's your company." Maya snatched the file and opened it. Blueprints of her research labs, maps of their satellite offices, payroll lists, security clearances, and at the very bottom, a personnel file stamped active. Her COO's face stared up at her, except the name beside the photo wasn't his. It was someone else, entirely. Someone tied to the Willards. Someone inserted into her company a decade earlier under a fabricated identity. Lewis whispered, "He wasn't working for you. No." Maya said, voice cracking, "He was watching me." She closed the file. Then the lights in the hallway flickered. Twice. Lewis froze. "They found us." Maya shoved the files into the trunk, locked it, and motioned toward the back of the storage room. "There's another exit. Dad wouldn't store this here without one." Voices echoed in the hallway. 3, maybe 4 men. Boots. Slow. Confident, Lewis whispered. "What do we do?" Maya grabbed the journal, the envelopes and her father's final letter. She tucked them into a coat and pulled Lewis toward the dark corner of the unit. "We don't fight," she whispered. "We vanish." She pushed against a metal panel behind the chair. It shifted. A narrow passageway opened into a service corridor lined with old pipes. The men reached the main hallway. Flashlights sliced across the concrete. One voice spoke low and amused. "She'll be here." Maya pulled Lewis into the darkness and let the metal panel close quietly behind them. They walked without speaking, without breathing too loudly, without looking back, because they were no longer running from a family. They were running from a system that had planned their destruction before they were even old enough to understand why. And Boulder was only the beginning. The real hunt had just begun. The service corridor stretched endlessly, a narrow concrete throat, echoing every breath and footstep. The walls were cold enough to leach heat from skin. Pipes ran overhead like exposed veins, humming faintly with water and age. Maya kept one hand on the wall, the other gripping Lewis's wrist as she guided him through the dark. His limp was worsening. She could hear it in the uneven drag of his right foot across the floor. Just a little farther, she whispered, though she had no idea how far the corridor ran. Lewis exhaled through clenched teeth. "If I pass out, drag me." "Don't stop. You're not passing out. You don't get to decide that." She squeezed his arm, not to comfort him, but to keep him awake. The air smelled of rust and old insulation, heavy enough to taste. The corridor curved left, then right, then narrowed, forcing them to turn sideways until they reached a rusted metal grate blocking their path. Maya ran her fingers along the frame, welded, reinforced, but the bolts were old. She wedged her shoulder under one corner and pushed. Metal groaned. Dust rained down. Lewis braced himself beside her and shoved with what strength he had left. The grate popped loose with a screech. Light spilled through the opening, soft, natural. Early morning. They crawled out onto a steep embankment behind the storage facility, hidden by scrub brush and a cracked retaining wall. The city spread out below them in muted blues and golds, the flatirons rising like jagged guardians behind it. A freight train rumbled in the distance, but no voices, no footsteps, no SUVs waiting. They had bought themselves minutes, nothing more. Lewis sagged against the wall chest, heaving. "What now?" Maya scanned the terrain. "We need to split." He turned sharply. "Absolutely not. It's the only way. They're tracking both of us. If we stick together, we're predictable. If we divide, someone has a chance to get the documents out." Lewis shook his head, pain flashing across his eyes. "No. We're not doing the sacrificial hero thing. We stay together." "Lewis, I'm not leaving you, Maya." She looked away, jaw tightening. She didn't want to split either. But the truth had shifted the moment she saw the false identity in her COO's file. The enemy wasn't chasing them. They'd been planted to pull the pieces together. Her father hadn't been paranoid. He'd been targeted. Lewis touched her shoulder. "If you disappear alone, I won't be able to find you. You'll vanish into this system they built, and I won't let that happen." She swallowed hard. "All right." together. They slid down the embankment and reached a narrow access road that snaked behind several industrial buildings. A bus approached in the distance, Route 25, one of the lines that ran straight to the mountains. Maya flagged it down. The driver, a man in his 70s with a grey beard and a ball cap that read, "Vietnam Vet," opened the doors. "You two lost?" he asked, eyes narrowing at Lewis's limp. Maya forced a polite smile. "Car trouble." "We're just trying to get closer to the canyon trailheads." The driver motioned them in. "I'm heading that way. Don't bleed on my seats." Lewis huffed a laugh, despite himself. They took seats midway back. Maya pressed her face to the window, scanning every vehicle behind them. Nothing stood out. But her father's letter echoed relentlessly. "Trust no one, not even the ones you believe you raised." She felt her stomach tighten. The phrasing was too deliberate, too personal. Her company's infiltration she could understand. But raised it meant something deeper. Something she wasn't ready to face. Lewis nudged her. "You're doing that thing where you vanish into your mind. Just thinking about Dad and everything he didn't tell us." The bus passed into a quiet residential stretch, tall trees hanging over the road. Shadows flickered across the aisle. Maya traced her fingers along the leather journal in her coat, feeling the edges of the pages. "Lewis," she said quietly, "do you ever wonder why Dad insisted on adopting you?" He blinked. "What kind of question is that? You were almost 10. I was 9. He chose you out of dozens of placement options. He said he felt something connection destiny. I never understood it." Lewis stiffened. "Maya, what are you getting at?" She didn't have an answer, not one she trusted enough to speak aloud. The bus slowed at a stop near the foothills. A group of hikers boarded. Among them was a man wearing sunglasses, despite the dim morning light. His head turned just slightly toward them, too slightly. A flicker of recognition passed through Maya's gut. "We get off here," she said abruptly. Lewis followed her without argument. They stepped onto the gravel shoulder and watched the bus pull away. The man in sunglasses remained on board, his face turned toward the window, unmoving. Lewis whispered, "They found us again." "Not yet. But they're close." They started up the trail that wound toward the old mining road. The air thinned as they climbed. Pine needles carpeted the path. A hawk circled above its cry, piercing the calm. Halfway up, Maya stopped. "Listen." Lewis held his breath. Footsteps. Below them. 2 sets. Maybe 3. Fast. Closing. Lewis hissed, "They're running. Then we don't." She pulled him off the trail, guiding him into dense brush. They ducked behind a fallen log, breath tight as the footsteps grew louder. 3 men in hiking gear sprinted past, too fit, too focused to be casual hikers. They vanished around the bend. Lewis exhaled shakily. "We can't do this all day. We won't." She pulled the leather journal from her coat and flipped to the final pages. Her father had written coordinates not in Boulder, but outside the old mining town of Eldora, farther up the canyon. There was a name written beside the coordinates. One she hadn't seen in 15 years, her father's closest friend. A man she'd believe dead. James Carter. Lewis saw the name and nearly dropped the journal. "You're kidding. Dad told us he died in a plane crash. He told us a lot of things." Wind rustled through the trees. Somewhere below, one of the men shouted, angry, frustrated. Maya closed the journal. "We go to Eldora," she said. "If Dad left answers anywhere, they're with Carter." Lewis wiped sweat from his forehead. "And if Carter's part of this, then we finally see the scale of the enemies we're up against." She helped him to his feet. They stepped back onto the trail. Behind them, A hawk screamed again, circling hunting patient. Ahead of them, the canyon narrowed into shadow. A road vanished into the mountains like a secret carved from stone, and Maya walked toward it, knowing that whatever waited in Eldora would either save them or finish what began the night her father was taken. The old mining road twisted upward through Eldora like a scar the mountain refused to heal. Maya guided Lewis along its narrow edge, her arm locked around his waist as the altitude thinned the air and sharpened every breath. Snow lingered in shaded patches, despite the season crunching under their shoes. The wind carried the metallic scent of old ore, rusted rails, and forgotten labor. Far below the canyon, stretched in a dark green sweep, the sound of water rushing beneath ice. Lewis stumbled, but Maya steadied him before the fall. "We're close," she murmured, even though doubt gnawed at her with every step. Ahead stood a row of abandoned cabins, timber collapsing inward windows, clouded with age. Except for one. A faint trail of smoke curled from the chimney of the furthest cabin, rising into the cold blue sky. It looked impossibly small against the mountain, weathered yet alive. Lewis noticed it too. If that's really Carter. Maya didn't let him finish. She had no space left for hopes, only for outcomes. They approached slowly. The snow thinned beneath a covered porch. The wood creaked under her weight. She raised her hand to knock, but the door opened before she touched it. A man stood there, tall shoulders, still strong despite age beard, white as frost. His eyes were sharp, unblinking, studying her with a recognition that hit her like a blow. "You look like him," he said softly, "like Robert did before they broke him." Lewis stumbled forward. "Carter." The old man nodded once. "Get inside. You've been followed for at least 2 miles. They entered quickly. The cabin was cramped, lit by lanterns that cast warm, flickering shadows across the walls. Papers carpeted the table, maps pinned to boards. A radio scanner hissed softly in the background. Carter shut the door, locked it, then pulled a heavy iron bar across it. "Sit," he said, gesturing to 2 chairs. "You both look half dead." Lewis collapsed into one. Maya remained standing. Her guard was too high to lower even here. Carter's gaze softened, though the weight behind it remained. "You have questions," he said. "And you deserve answers." Maya opened her coat and placed the leather journal on the table. Carter stared at it, with something like grief, something like pride. "He kept it safe," Maya said quietly. "No," Carter replied. "He kept you safe by hiding it." She swallowed. "My father said the Willards weren't the core, that something else was behind it. Something older." Carter nodded slowly. "The consortium." Lewis's brow furrowed. "A corporation." "No," Carter said. "It's not a company. It's a structure, a network that predates most of the institutions you think hold power." Maya's voice stayed steady. "My COO worked for them." "Of course he did." Carter leaned forward. Robert suspected there was a plant inside his circle. He didn't know who, but he knew why. The consortium doesn't steal money. They steal influence, small decisions hidden inside big ones, nudges that shape economies. Your father refused to be a part of it. "And they destroyed him," Maya whispered. "They tried." Carter's gaze locked on hers. "But he left you something more important than evidence. He left you time." She opened her father's letter again, tracing the line she could not shake. "Trust no one. Not even the ones you believe you raised." "What does this mean?" Maya asked. "Why would he write that?" Carter hesitated, then picked up a folder from the corner of the table. He slid it to her. "Open it," he said. Maya lifted the cover. Inside was a birth certificate. Her birth certificate. except the names etched across the faded paper were not Robert Robinson and Margaret Robinson. They were unknown. The room tilted slightly. Carter spoke before she could find breath. Robert wasn't your biological father. He wasn't hiding it because he feared what you'd think. He hid it because of who your real parents were. Lewis blinked, stunned. Maya. She kept her eyes on the paper. Then who were they? Carter folded his hands. Your mother was one of the consortium's top analysts. Brilliant. Dangerous to them once she grew a conscience. Your father, your biological father, was the engineer who designed their data channeling system. He tried to shut it down. The consortium erased them both. Maya felt the shock give way to something colder. And Robert took me. He rescued you, Carter said. He hid you by raising you as his own. He changed his entire life to bury you so deeply the consortium couldn't find you. Not until recently. Lewis shook his head. Why tell us now? Because they know, Carter said. They know who you are, and they know what you carry. Maya closed the folder with trembling fingers. The journal. No, Carter said. His voice had turned low, urgent. You. Silence swallowed the room. Then the radio scanner crackled to life. A calm voice transmitted through static. Northridge cabin. 2 heat signatures. Move in on my mark. Carter lunged to the window and cursed under his breath. They're here. Lewis rose, wincing. We have to run. We can't outrun them, Carter said. They've blocked the road already. Maya stepped beside him. Then how do we get out? He pointed to a trap door beneath the rug. Old mining tunnels. They're unstable, but better than staying here to die. Lewis staggered toward it. Carter pulled a revolver from a drawer and handed it to Maya. I know you don't like guns, he said, but this one likes you. She took it. The door rattled violently. Wood strained. A hinge snapped. Carter shoved them both toward the trap door. Go, I'll hold them off. No, Maya said. You can't. I already lived past the point they expected. Your father didn't. I won't let both of you join him. Now move. The cabin shuddered as the front door burst inward. Heavy boots hit the floor. Maya climbed into the darkness, pulling Lewis with her. Carter locked eyes with her one last time. They underestimated you, he whispered. Then he slammed the trapdoor shut. Gunfire erupted above them, splintering wood, shouting. Carter's voice roaring in defiance. Maya grabbed Lewis's hand and ran into the pitch-black tunnel as dust rained from the ceiling. The ground trembled with distant impact. Light from above disappeared, swallowed by the earth. Her breath echoed off stone walls. Behind them, the mountain shook. Ahead, the tunnel stretched like a vein toward an unknown future, and Maya ran toward it, carrying her father's final truth, her mother's hidden past, and the weight of a system that now wanted her erased. If you want to see where this story leads, make sure to subscribe, and comment the phrase, "I stand here."